It is Monday, August 24th, 2026. This is the Spin Room. I'm Dr. Elliott Morgan. I hope you had a lovely weekend. I sure did. I ended up getting an A in my fantasy football draft, which I think is the greatest accomplishment I've ever had in any kind of sporting. So that's pretty exciting. Looks like all of us are breaking records. So I thought, why not today? Let's just check in on like some polling and see how everything's going, because I don't know about you, but when I'm watching TV or doom scrolling and I see another story about like that, Super El Nino or another food I've always trusted that I now have to look suspiciously upon, I start to wonder, is it just me? Or are other people also maybe dissatisfied with our leadership? Or am I just in this like ensconced bubble, slowly mentally deteriorating into some sort of nihilistic oblivion? And it turns out I might not be wrong. So today we're going to watch two videos, one from MS Now, which never forget stands for my source for news, opinion, and the world, which I will never not think is funny. And then the second clip is, of course, Harry Enton from CNN. So let's dive into it and see what the folks over at my source for news, opinion, and the world have to say.
So amid record low polling, and we're talking record low, a new projection shows President Trump's net approval rating is negative in 47 out of 50 states.
Okay, did I choose this specifically because I thought it was funny? Yeah.
That is according to The Economist and YouGov. Trump's net approval is minus 26, going state by state. The data shows widespread dissatisfaction with Trump, even in places that voted for him in 2024. Ahead of the midterms, Trump has a negative net approval rating in all of the states where there are competitive Senate races this year. In Georgia, Trump's net approval is negative 31. In North Carolina, it's negative 25. In Maine, Trump's net approval is negative 31. In Texas, it is negative 22. And in Michigan, Trump's net approval is negative 27.
Do you think in Texas they're still mad about that whole screw worm fly thing? Do you think maybe that got under their skin? Sorry.
Jonathan Lemire, I'm curious. It almost feels like Trump and his administration is going in one direction, and the will of the American people, the needs of the American people, the needs of our alliances around the world, they're headed in a completely different direction. So it seems like he doesn't care.
This is the kind of cutting-edge political analysis I have come to love and expect from my source for news, opinion, in the world.
About these numbers, am I wrong?
Well, Mika, my expert analysis on that polling is it's real bad. None of this is working for the president right now. That's why we have Republicans, really worried about this November. Many privately concede the House all but gone. The Senate feels like a true toss-up when a year ago at this time, we would have said Republicans were heavily favored to keep at least the upper chamber, despite, of course, history telling us that the president, his party tends to do poorly in midterms. But you're right, Mika, in ticking through some of the issues here. The tariffs have been unpopular, and now we're at a renewed trade war with Canada. The Iran war, deeply unpopular, never sold by the president to the American people. All it has done is send prices soaring, particularly at the gas pump. And they've settled into a plan of economic pressure. Maybe that will work. And we are seeing some disagreement in Tehran as to how they want to approach the conflict. But even if this does work, it's probably going to be a long time, too late to save Republicans, perhaps, for this midterms. And we're seeing, of course, as we'll get into it a little bit later, even the president's efforts to try to lower beef prices. A lot of Republicans pushing back, saying, none of this is working right now. And John Heilman, it seems like,
hey, nothing you're doing is going well. Sir, Mr. President, none of this is working.
Mika's point, the president largely detached from a lot of this. To Heilman, this is someone who has, seems to be focused solely on legacy.
You don't say. Words like detached to describe our president, you don't say. Concerned more with his own legacy than with the needs of the American. No, not him, not Donald Trump. What has he ever done in the past that would make us even suspect such a thing? Unbelievable. All right, let's check in now with Harry Enton.
the first place. It's inflation. It's inflation. I mean, you rarely ever see drops like this. Trump's net approval rating on inflation among white non-college voters, look at this, was plus 22 points at the beginning of Trump's second term. It's minus 38. I was so surprised by this number. I actually had my producer Gordon go back and check this. I thought that this was a mistake. I thought that this was an error because you never see drops. What is this? This is a 60-point drop. This is a 60-point drop in a little bit less than a year and a half. A nearly 60-point drop. Now Trump is 38 points in the red in a group that is part of his own voter base. Okay, so this is the bad news for Republicans, right? But remember, I'm talking about sweeping out both parties. I'm talking about sweeping out both parties. And what's the bad news for Democrats? Because the bottom line is,
I love Harry Enten, but I don't think he's ever held that one of those things in his life. Also, if you want to know what's bad news for Democrats, I think you're looking at them in that graphic.
Both parties are seen as giant turkeys. They're seen as giant turkeys by white non-college voters. Boy, that was a loud sound, wasn't it?
What are they doing over there? Also, I have to hand it to CNN for at least having some sort of like soul behind what they're doing. Whereas when you watch MS Now, otherwise known as my source for news opinion in the world, there's just sort of like a soullessness behind them. I think you can kind of tell why they might be a little threatened by new media, but that's neither here nor there. Please, Harry, continue.
That's a hoe falling to the ground. How about the net favorability rating in the Democratic Party? Look at this. Look at this long-term trend. In 2012, it was minus 2 points. Look at where it was in a CBS News poll that came out within the last month. The Democratic Party's net favorability with non-college white voters, minus 36 points. So the short-term trend, not necessarily good for Republicans and Donald Trump, but the long-term trends, really, really bad for the Democratic Party. Really, really bad. We're talking about, what is this? This is a 34-point drop over the last 14 years. And even if Donald Trump is struggling, remember, it's which side is losing more. When you match up Democrats and Republicans on the economy, what do we see? Do we see, despite the fact that Trump's economic net approval rating is negative, that all of a sudden Democrats are trusted more? They are not trusted more. Look at this. Party that, well, isn't that interesting? Sometimes you get the slide cut off a little bit here, but there we go. We'll put that P right there. Party white non-college trust more on the economy. Look at this. It's Republicans, plus 16 points. Republicans are still trusted more on the economy. And
yeah, we got quite a road ahead of us, folks. I'll tell you that, because I want to first go back to what they were saying over at MS Now, between me falling asleep while I was watching them. But like this whole Iran war, like assuming and God willing it ends sooner than later, the damage done from it is going to take quite a while. But I also think that is like a microcosm for basically how this administration has functioned for the past year. The systematic dismantling of so many of our institutions is not something that is as easy to build back as it was to tear down. It's much easier to go through with a chainsaw and, take out food inspectors and expose people's social security data and, cut USAID and make sure that, impoverished people all over the world can't get the food and the medical supplies that they need. But actually being able to rebuild those systems is going to take quite a bit of time. And I think that the level of anger we're experiencing right now and the level of dissatisfaction is going to get directed at the Democrats when they take over. And I think that's an important thing to remember when we're watching the Democratic Party essentially continue to eat itself, which they love doing. And they've loved doing it my entire life. And also, when you have a Democratic Party that for the past 14 years has dropped however many points that was from non-college voters, I think that should also tell you something about the infighting that is happening on the left, because I do think on the left there are folks who are wanting to actually get back to appealing to working class people, but by actually improving their material conditions. And then you have this entire establishment of like political strategists who sit behind a computer and their only job is to try to appeal in some way to working class voters. And I think that's an incredibly insulting way to go about it. And I think people are really smart, generally speaking, regardless of whatever kind of education you have. Human beings tend to be smart, or at the very least, they understand when they're being like talked down to and lied to. So when there's this fighting happening on the left, I think, one, it's clear what side could actually maybe get some of those points back from non-college voters. But the way to do that is through actual policies and not just through lip service, which I think folks at MS Now tend to like to do a little bit more, but that's just me. No offense to them. I can't imagine why they're so threatened by new media, yada, yada. I wish them all the best. But yeah, I think when the Democrats continue to fight, it's good to have a side, because there's a lot of work that's going to need to get done real quick. And we're going to need Democrats, unlike Chuck Schumer, who actually do those things. Novel concept. I know. It's no MS Now, but I think that makes sense. I'll have to run it through the polling first to find out more, I guess. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you had a wonderful time. Click like on and subscribe, and also, you know, good luck on your fantasy football, because I think I almost understand what a running back does. I'll see you next time.